When people say that Linux Mint is just Ubuntu with makeup, they're not entirely joking, but they're also not telling the whole story. The phrase is catchy, slightly provocative, and simple enough to spark debate in any tech forum. But behind that quip lies a deeper discussion about what Linux distributions really are, how they evolve, and what makes one feel completely different from another even when they share the same foundation. To understand whether Linux Mint is truly just Ubuntu with cosmetic changes, we have to peel back the layers and look at history, philosophy, technical structure, design choices, user experience, and long-term strategy. At the most basic technical level, Linux Mint is built on top of Ubuntu, and Ubuntu itself is built on top of Debian, the long-standing community-driven project maintained by the Debian community. This layered structure is common in the Linux world. One distribution uses another as a base, adds its own tools, tweaks, configurations, modifies the user interface, and releases something that feels distinct. In that sense, Linux Mint standing on Ubuntu's shoulders is not unusual. It's how much of the open source ecosystem works. Ubuntu is developed and backed by Canonical, a company that aims to make Linux accessible, polished, and commercially viable. Ubuntu has long positioned itself as the beginner-friendly Linux distribution, the one you install if you're coming from Windows or Mac OS and want something that just works. It emphasizes hardware compatibility, strong defaults, and broad software availability. Because of this, Ubuntu became the foundation for countless other distributions. Linux Mint chose Ubuntu as its base precisely because Ubuntu had already solved many difficult problems such as driver support, package management, stability, and large-scale maintenance. So if Mint uses Ubuntu's repositories, Ubuntu's core packages, and Ubuntu's kernel builds, is it fair to say Mint is simply Ubuntu with a new theme? On the surface, that might seem plausible. Install Ubuntu and Linux Mint side by side and check the system details, and you'll notice similarities in kernel versions, underlying libraries, and package sources. But once you start interacting with both systems, the differences become obvious. The most visible difference is the desktop environment. Ubuntu today defaults to GNOME, developed by contributors organized around the GNOME Foundation. GNOME has a modern, streamlined interface with an emphasis on simplicity and minimalism. It uses an activities overview, a dock, and a workflow that departs significantly from the traditional Windows-style layout. This design philosophy prioritizes focus and decluttering over familiarity. Linux Mint, by contrast, ships primarily with the Cinnamon desktop environment, which was created by the Mint team after Ubuntu made a controversial shift years ago from its own Unity interface to GNOME. Cinnamon intentionally preserves a more traditional desktop metaphor. It has a bottom panel, a start menu-like launcher, a system tray, and a window list that resembles what many Windows users expect. This design decision alone dramatically changes the user experience. For someone switching from Windows, Mint often feels immediately comfortable, while Ubuntu can feel foreign and abstract. But calling that difference makeup oversimplifies what a desktop environment actually is. The desktop environment controls window management, system settings, default applications, themes, applets, and extensions. It shapes how you navigate files, launch programs, manage notifications, and customize your system. It is not just a skin layered on top. It defines how the operating system feels on a daily basis. In practical terms, Cinnamon changes the workflow so significantly that many users perceive Mint and Ubuntu as entirely different systems. Beyond the desktop environment, Mint makes deliberate decisions about default software. Ubuntu includes Snap integration heavily, promoting Canonical's Snap packaging format for distributing applications. Snaps are containerized applications designed to be secure and easy to update across distributions. However, they can be slower to launch and sometimes consume more disk space. Mint's developers have expressed philosophical and practical concerns about snaps, centralization, and performance. As a result, Mint disables Snap by default and instead emphasizes traditional apt packages and Flatpak support. This is not a superficial tweak. Package management is central to the Linux experience, the method by which software is installed, updated, sandboxed, and distributed affects performance, privacy, disk usage, and user control by taking a different stance on snaps and enabling Flatpak support more prominently. Mint subtly shifts the ecosystem its users interact with. Over time, these decisions influence what software gets installed, how it's updated, and how integrated it feels. Mint also includes its own suite of tools known as XApps and System Utilities. These include a customized update manager, a software manager, and configuration tools tailored to provide clarity and stability. The Mint Update Manager, for example, historically categorized updates by safety level to help beginners understand potential risks. While modern versions have simplified that approach, the philosophy remains. Shield users from unnecessary complexity and unexpected breakage. Ubuntu, on the other hand, balances user-friendliness with Canonical's broader goals, which include cloud integration, enterprise services, and commercial support contracts. Ubuntu's design decisions often reflect a dual focus: desktop users and enterprise clients. Mint focuses almost exclusively on desktop users. That narrower focus allows it to optimize for stability and familiarity in ways that Ubuntu, with its broader ambitions, sometimes does not. Another key difference lies in release philosophy. Ubuntu follows a predictable release cycle with long-term support versions every 2 years and interim releases every 6 months. Mint typically bases its major releases on Ubuntu's LTS versions, prioritizing stability over rapid change. This means Mint users are often insulated from the frequent transitions and experimental shifts that can occur in interim Ubuntu releases. For users who value predictability, this matters a great deal. It's also important to recognize the psychological and aesthetic dimensions. Mint's visual design choices aim for subtle elegance rather than bold experimentation. Themes are carefully tuned, icons are cohesive, and default settings are chosen to reduce friction. While Ubuntu also invests in design, its aesthetic tends to reflect the GNOME ecosystem's upstream vision. Mint's developers frequently override upstream decisions if they believe those decisions compromise usability. Critics who say Mint is just Ubuntu with makeup often underestimate how much effort it takes to curate and maintain a distribution. Even if the underlying packages come from Ubuntu repositories, integration work is substantial, ensuring that Cinnamon interacts smoothly with system services, that updates don't break custom tools, that drivers behave consistently, and that new Ubuntu changes don't disrupt Mint's workflow requires ongoing maintenance. This is not a matter of changing wallpapers and icons. It's a continuous engineering commitment. There's also a philosophical layer to consider. Ubuntu, through Canonical, has sometimes made unilateral decisions that sparked controversy in the Linux community, such as past experiments with Amazon search integration or aggressive snap promotion. Mint has occasionally positioned itself as a corrective force, emphasizing user choice and transparency. Whether one agrees with those stances or not, they reflect a distinct identity rather than mere cosmetic differentiation. From a performance standpoint, Mint can feel lighter and more responsive on older hardware, particularly with its Mate and XFCE editions. These desktop options prioritize efficiency, while Ubuntu can also run lighter environments if installed manually. Mint makes these choices readily accessible. Again, this is about curation. The out-of-the-box experience differs in tangible ways. Security practices also show subtle differences. Both systems inherit security updates from Ubuntu, which in turn benefits from Debian's upstream patches. However, Mint's update presentation and configuration aim to reduce the likelihood of inexperienced users. Skipping important updates out of fear, the balance between caution and clarity shapes user behavior over time. Community culture further distinguishes the two. Ubuntu has a massive global presence, corporate backing, and enterprise partnerships. Mint's community feels smaller and more grassroots. Its development blog posts often speak directly to users in a conversational tone. This fosters loyalty and a sense of intimacy. For many users, that cultural atmosphere matters just as much as technical underpinnings. To say Mint is Ubuntu with makeup implies superficiality. Makeup changes appearance without altering structure, but Mint changes workflow, package philosophy, default applications, user interface paradigms, and community tone. The kernel may be the same. The repositories may overlap, but the lived experience diverges meaningfully. At the same time, it would be inaccurate to deny the deep dependency. If Ubuntu vanished tomorrow, Mint would face enormous challenges. Its infrastructure relies heavily on Ubuntu's packaging work, security, maintenance, and hardware enablement. In that sense, Mint stands downstream in a hierarchy. It benefits from Ubuntu's engineering investments. That reality tempers claims of total independence. Interestingly, Mint also offers a Debian edition, often called LMDE, which bypasses Ubuntu entirely and builds directly on Debian. This version exists as a contingency plan, ensuring Mint could survive if Ubuntu's direction became untenable. The mere existence of LMDE shows that Mint's team is aware of its reliance and actively prepares alternatives. When evaluating whether Mint is just Ubuntu with makeup, the answer depends on perspective. From a systems engineer's viewpoint, analyzing package sources and kernels, the similarities dominate. From a user's perspective, interacting daily with menus, panels, software managers, and update tools, the differences loom large. Operating systems are not judged solely by their package trees. They are judged by how they make users feel. Do they reduce friction? Do they respect established workflows? Do they surprise users with unwanted changes? In these domains, Mint has carved out a distinct reputation. Many users who felt alienated by Ubuntu's interface transitions found refuge in Mint's consistency. The Linux ecosystem thrives on this diversity. Distributions remix and reinterpret one another constantly. Fedora differs from Red Hat Enterprise Linux despite shared lineage. Countless Arch-based distributions offer distinct experiences despite common roots. In open source derivation is not theft, it is collaboration. Mint building on Ubuntu exemplifies this ethos. So, is Linux Mint just Ubuntu with makeup? Technically, it shares DNA. Philosophically and experientially, it has evolved into something with its own personality. The makeup analogy captures a surface resemblance but misses the structural tailoring underneath. It's less like applying lipstick and more like redesigning the interior of a house while keeping the foundation intact. In the end, the distinction may not matter to users who simply want a stable, friendly desktop operating system. Both deliver that goal in different ways. Ubuntu emphasizes broad reach and corporate alignment. Mint emphasizes comfort and user-centric refinement. One builds the highway. The other repaints the lanes and adjusts the signage to make the drive smoother. The beauty of Linux lies in this very flexibility. Foundations can be shared while visions diverge. Mint would not exist without Ubuntu. Ubuntu would not exist without Debian. And Debian stands on decades of collaborative work from the broader free software community, including contributions stewarded by organizations like the Linux Foundation. Each layer adds interpretation and intention. Calling Mint Ubuntu with makeup is a simplification that makes for a catchy video title. But once you look closer, you see a more nuanced picture. It's Ubuntu with deliberate redesign, curated defaults, philosophical adjustments, and a user experience crafted to prioritize familiarity and control. The foundation is shared, yes. The face may look similar under the hood, but the personality, priorities, and daily interactions tell a richer story than a cosmetic metaphor can capture.